why it does that. Sometimes at the half an hour mark, it just gives up on me. Maybe. You went wrong. You really not going to work? Oh, it seems to be working now. All right. There we go.
So now, are we in this? We're in the same. Yeah, we're on the stream. Okay, got it.
You know, it's the weirdest thing, but I find that exactly the half an hour mark is the time it cuts out. So every live I do, as it starts to get to 30 minutes, I'm like, please don't cut out, please don't cut out.
Okay. Maybe it's just the software default. Who knows?
But what I was asking was, it was funny that you were bringing up combining those, because I actually got a fan question from my buddy Nate Mayer, and he wants to know if you've ever been tempted to combine sci-fi, fantasy, and romance all into one story.
Sci-fi, fantasy, and romance. I can already imagine how that would be. So you'd have a post-apocalypse set at 5,000 years in the future, where boiling water again on the plains because we forgot everything. So it's technically future. Find lost technology. What's this stick? I don't know. It goes boom, and that's great. And at the same time, you just have these two young people from different tribes, with weird technology who just want to be in love, but they can't. I mean, that's classic. You're a retro sci-fi future fantasy. It's magic, but it's really science romance.
Yeah, I love it. I've read. I'm trying to remember. What I find interesting is I haven't really seen, like, there's a lot of stories out there about Fae. Why are there no Fae in space? That's what we need.
Can they just not be an alien race of Fae? I mean, why not? Absolutely.
Or
It can be done.
witches in space. Or dragons.
It can absolutely be done.
So something else I thought was really cool too. So we were talking about what gives you inspiration and what drew you to those genres. But one of the things you had mentioned in the written interview was that you kind of got inspired by the 2010s trend to make children's games into gritty movies, which I love that, because I loved those kind of games. So I don't know how did you bridge that between, loving these games and deciding to make it into a book?
Yeah. Do you remember? I think maybe it was the 2000s. They released a Battleship movie that was like, and it was like really strange.
It's
and there's
awful.
a hide and seek one.
God loves it.
Yeah, like there are a couple of those. There's Real Steel with Jackman, right?
Yep.
Punch 'em robots. So I was seeing some of those, and I think what I found most interesting is, on the surface, if you didn't name the movie so clearly what it is, it might actually just be its own thing. But once you realize that they're connected, you see, oh, okay, I see where it's kind of inspired. And so I was interested in doing kind of the same thing. Like, they could stand completely by themselves, but when you know they're kind of related to the children's games, like, it's just like, oh, I see where the influence is, and it's kind of interesting. So, like, for example, the book is not named that. It doesn't really point that out. It's just like where it came from. So when people sometimes ask, like, oh, yeah, there was some inspiration, like, hide and seek is related directly. Like, yeah, there's a whole chapter where it's kind of like that. Like, oh, that's so interesting. So that was an inspiration that led me there, and then we kind of just I didn't like marry it together. It's just, it became an inspiration.
I love it. Well, something else that I wanted to ask you about, when I had asked about your technique to write the book, you said you use a combination of the Pomodoro technique during the day, and you'd also do write-a-thons during work holidays. I've never heard of the Pomodoro effect, or technique. I'd love to hear what that's about, and I'd love to hear about the write-a-thons too.
So the Pomodoro technique also is known as the tomato method. because of a long time ago, little desktop timers look like tomatoes, and you just twist them. It was a popular kind of thing. So what you do is you write for spurts of time in an hour, like 20-minute spurts, but then you have 5-minute breaks. It's similar to what I'm doing now, where I spend an hour a day working on it. Because you have that designated time of 2020, like 2020, and then, you know, however the gap's left, you work extra hard because you know there is a gap. And when you rest, you like rest hard because you know you need to return, and you were hopefully dedicated. It's like, it's a psychological ability of telling yourself, I did work hard and I devoted that time, therefore I deserve rest. And because I deserve rest, I therefore need to work hard to deserve it. It's like this cycle. So there's a couple methods like that have different time scales. Pomodoros all fit within an hour is kind of its general one. And for write-a-thons, because I work in higher education, we work on an academic schedule. There's just certain times where work is a little lower, where there's a little less going on. And so what that usually means is that I turn into a night owl, and I really start writing around 11 or midnight, maybe go to bed 3 or 4, and then wake up the next day and say, what did I do? I don't know. I need to edit that. But ideas can really happen in the night hour, where you let go of your inhibitions because you're so tired, and then just see what happens. I do enjoy that.
It reminds me of one of my friends. He posts a lot of TikTok videos. He's also an author. His name's Justin Gladstone, but he posted this video yesterday, and it was like a video of him looking really happy and cheerful, and it was him writing late at night, and then he had like a really sad, miserable face, and it was rereading what you wrote the next day.
Yeah, it happened. It happened.
So it sounds like you were always kind of set on doing indie publishing. Did you consider traditionally publishing at all?
Yes. I spent probably about 11 months in late 2021 going into 2022, probably between September 2021 to probably July 2022, attempting traditional publishing. So I went to the library and I got a book, which is a full listing of all publishers and agents. And you can get it through like whatever the website, the national clearinghouse of that, but they have physical books and they send them to the library so you could rent it too for free. So I didn't want to pay for the PDF because it was like $100. So my library just went ahead and borrowed it from some other city that had it. And in there, it's like what you would expect. It's just like a yellow pages of all agents and all all publishing houses. And it tells you, you know, how to submit, what they accept, what their reply timeline is. And again, this is a thing you can pay for, but libraries support the library, they can get it for free. So I created spreadsheets where I read the whole book, all like thousands of them, and created spreadsheets of everybody who would be relevant, and just started contacting them. So I think I ended up contacting, this is like amateur numbers, I think I contacted 60 maybe publishing groups, right? People are like, I'm in the 200, 400, you know, all that. So I'm like, I'm just trying this, right? I don't really have like this giant audience that I can bring to it. You know, I'm not, you know, writing with an expert craft. I'm just trying it. So I thought that was fine. And so a lot of their response times are within, I don't know, 2 to 6 months. So at like the 8 to 9 month mark, I'm like, at this point, you know, I heard up from about half of them. Thank you that they even read my email, replied kindly that this doesn't fit their goals or whatever. Totally get it, whatever. So I'm at that point, like, people are looking at, I don't have like the next Hunger Games, which is fine. But now I have that support or validation that like, I'm free to now go do my own thing, and I'm not like missing out. So while I don't need someone to tell me they love it as much as they like Suzanne Collins' book, what I know is that like I was able to at least get it across the finish line, and that's something that a lot of people also have struggles doing. So in itself, I already have a lot of, I think, internal validation. But I gave it a shot, and it also helps me, I guess, give advice to others. As you know, it is a hard game to get into, and if you want to, the numbers got to be really high, and you're probably continuously refining during the process to give a better product. And that's just a hard rat race that I don't think was right for me.
Yeah, that doesn't sound pleasant. I don't know. That was kind of my thought too. Is I didn't even consider trying to. I still have a long ways to go, but I haven't considered doing traditionally published at all because I just feel like it's too much work. I know they say you do more when you're an independent author, but I can do it at my own pace.
I think the front end can be really hard because you're courting these folks, and the query lettering process, it's this whole other thing. And on my website, I have all my query letter research. So if you go there, it's like on the front page for the books, and it says, if you're an author, click this button. It's like, I don't know, 25 pages of every resource that I read about it, all the lessons that I learned and all of my sample query letters, so you can just get an idea. Like if you wanted to get into it, oh man, I spent months learning how to write query letters.
Wow.
And like once hopefully a publisher picks you up, then I'm hoping, you know, it's more hand in hand. They help. But yeah, self-publishing, it may be easy to get started and you get to make your own decisions, but it never stops, right? You're going to be doing 100% the whole. So yeah, it's a different style.
Something else I thought was really neat is you keep a Google Doc with all of your ideas in it. So I'm kind of curious, when you do that, do you find it to be overwhelming, keeping track of too many things? Do you find that you'll use multiple ideas in one? How does that work now?
Yeah. Overwhelming is very easy to happen, right? Because you have too many ideas and you have to organize them in a certain way. I organize things in a way, for me, that's mostly categorical. And so in Google Drive, which is what I use a lot right now, each book has its own little folder, and inside it'll have subfolders between ideas or marketing, pictures or something like that. And then I'll have several docs. Usually there's it always starts with an idea doc. Idea doc will have just brainstorming stuff. And then at some point I'll have a second doc that'll be like hard decisions, which will be more like, what is my themes? What are my pitch? And then at some point then I create the doc is where I start to write the story. In a long form sci-fi book that I've been writing for like 10 years, which is when I was a very hobbyist, right? Like there's no way I'll ever release this. This is just for fun. I'm not completed. That one has 6 different docs. And so the docs are separated between the timeline of the universe, where it's just a list of years and dates, because I need to keep it all in my head. I have all the story arcs in one, lore in another, the physical book in one, all characters and all their character profiles in another. And that's just like how I keep track of it, but that's also a 300,000 word hobby right now, to which I have no idea if it will ever be viable. It's my Game of Thrones. I'll just put it off to the side, touch it every so once in a while. And also, like, the skill in it is so me years ago, right? But I haven't returned back to really, like, polish it up. But that's okay. That one's just for fun. Not like these shorter, more marketable ones.
That's kind of the stage where I'm at, because I had written the draft, and then I thought, well, I have to make sure everything stays the same. So I have, like, a whole notebook where I took this. There's a company that makes these character workbooks and world building workbooks, and I bought each of them. But I can't write in them because I'm just the weirdo that can't write it. I have to write in a separate notebook. I keep it clean. So I have a separate notebook where I did like the whole world building workbook, the whole character building workbook, and then I got so overwhelmed that I just stopped.
Absolutely. Like if I were to scroll through the lore one of my hobby one, it goes on for like 50 pages of every single like backstory thing, all the character arcs, all the plots, all the ideas. And to organize them, not only are they mostly in chronological order, that helps me a little bit. I use color coding too, different highlighting for something that's in progress, arc that I completed, one that's like a neat idea, but I never know if I can use it. You got to use a lot of different methods. And for me, chronological and color seems to help a lot. And then putting things in separate pockets.
Me too. I'm the same way. All my spreadsheets are color coded. So what authors do you think really influence your style, or at least got you inspired or pulled into fantasy and sci-fi?
I think, when I think about those classics, Arthur C. Clarke and Asimov, I appreciated the connection to the possible with the extension of what could be. And so they inspire me most, or when I write about something new, science-y. I really ask myself, like, am I so far into imagining what this could be that's no longer science fiction? It is fantasy. So I do try to rein myself in when I'm writing the science fiction with them as kind of a rubric. Some recent Stephen King stuff, because he does science fiction too, in addition to horror. He does so much, right? I like some of his where they're science fiction, were in the sense that a lot of the ones that I have read are kind of modern-y, not that far in the future, and so in many ways he can still make it realistic, but then the horror always comes in, because that's kind of his whole thing. But that's inspired me in how he's able to mix some genres and feelings together. So I tried that. I like writing morally ambiguous villains typically, and so there's a number of authors who do that, and it's done in movies and video games as well. It's a current trend now to be more morally gray. So I get a lot of inspiration out of some of those popular examples.
I like it. So speaking of characters, out of all the characters that you've written, who was your favorite to write and who was the hardest to write?
Favorite character to write on the 3rd edition of Candy's Quest, which is the one that's out now. the villain, Morgana Malevolent, is this, like, seems so cartoony at first, like stealing unicorns, blasting magic balls, harassing people, flying around with a cape. And then 2 or 3 chapters of the book are dedicated to her in flashbacks. And you realize that, like, one of the songs that's played in one of her flashbacks is Lady Gaga's Born This Way. And her chapter is written to say it's specifically the opposite of what the song is. So while Lady Gaga is saying, feel comfortable in your skin, you're born this way, and the characters believe in that, be yourself, she is not. She very much tries to defy what her birth was and what her environment formed her to. She became this, and she's not born this way. And so that chapter is written as a juxtaposition. So I really like her because she's bad, but she wasn't supposed to really be that way. And it's like a tragedy at how that is. She's fun, yeah. I think probably the hardest character to write, I wrote a child in Vibrant Steel named Atticus, and writing children was difficult. I needed a lot of advice when I was doing that, like, how should they talk? And a lot of advice I got is children use more fancy vocabulary, sometimes not right, but more than you might give them credit for. So I'm like, great, I'm going to write the party pants, because that'll make it a little easier. So that was just difficult to think, what would a child think about this? They're not processing a year in advance. They're mostly responding to now, but they also have very different opinions of things, and they just say it out loud, and they have their own internal wants that sometimes they don't say out loud because they're embarrassed. That was hard to balance.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And you know, it's funny because I love listening to kids talk because sometimes they just say things you don't expect them to say. But one of the best pieces of advice, I can't talk today, that I ever got was to take a notebook with you everywhere you go and just like write down conversations that you hear, because sometimes that'll help. And so I've heard kids say such funny things, and I've just kind of written down some of the things that they've said, because it just kind of helps me think about how a kid might speak for future novels.
I guess, yeah, need examples, absolutely.
Now, how about with scenes? Do you find any types of scenes particularly difficult? Do you have a favorite scene that you've written? I
have a novella that I'm putting together now called The Mystery Train. It's going to be my first mystery, and that one is after I finished polishing this novella about superheroes. I wrote one about superheroes called Viral. So those are both like on my website under the like works in progress. So Mystery Train I like because it has some action, but it has mystery. And like writing mystery is like comedy. There is magic there that is hard to bottle. Like the way that you line the dominoes up and then knock them down, how satisfying that is to read. So I hope that I've done that. But the action sequences, there's some on trains and in the Wild West, because kind of a theme in like an 1800 kind of Texas town. So that was super fun, just writing something Western. And some of the difficult scenes that I've written, I think anything where like people are sad and they're talking about it, because my profession has some counseling involved, very loosely, like in emergency situations. And so I need to make sure that like I'm not sitting here really helping these characters' problems at the speed, which is slow when that needs to happen. I'm reading for entertainment. So like to distill somebody getting through their problems seems wrong, because that's not how it works. But like you just need to take out the pieces that really need to be there to get the plot along. So that could be difficult to slow down.
Yeah, so true. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I appreciate you joining me today. It was an absolute pleasure. I'm really excited to read your books. I actually, while we were sitting here, I added them all to my Kindle wish list because I do have Kindle Unlimited. So I'm going to read them all before you take them down.
Sure. Yeah, and if anything else, other questions come up from anybody in the readers or any of the fans, send them my way. I'd love to be able to answer those for them or anybody that's watching.
Will do. And I do want to mention also your website, www.CHOUSTORE, or is it the?
Oh, yeah, that's it. CHOUSTORE, Chou store. They go there. It connects to the books, but also the board games that I do. It's just kind of the landing page for several of my hobbies.
Okay, and I'll link it to the video also this way, because I believe you also sell your books on your website too, right?
Yes, they can go on there, connect to the different platforms.
All right, well, sounds great. Thank you so much for joining me. Really excited to read your books, and it was an honor. Thank you so much for spending this hour with me.
It was so much fun talking to you. Thank you very much.
Have a great night.
You too. Bye-bye.